Good afternoon. Welcome to Eretz Israel. I'm Avram Shira, and we are in Parshat Noach, the portion of the Torah that deals with the Great Flood, the events that came before, some of the events that came after. And it's an interesting thing when you come to the Torah and biblical literature in general, how much weight is put on genealogical interconnections, and how much weight is put on the past versus the present and what seems to be the unfolding direction of the future. But there's a principle in Torah that is based on the first letters of the name of Moses, Moshe, Mem Shin He. The rabbis teach us in the Talmud, it stands for Ma Shahayahu Shiyeh. That which was will be. Divine providence, predestination. And of course, that arouses in us the immediate question, well, what about free choice? We're men that are made to be free, women that are made to be free of all the constraints of men. Well, the government anyway, but no, we need government and we need the genders, obviously, but freedom it's a huge thing. And we're not going to discuss that right now because we all know freedom doesn't mean we can do what we want. We know that freedom means we can express ourselves in an honest way as long as we don't hurt other people. And there's many ways, unfortunately, to hurt people without lifting a sword or a gun or a tank or an F-16. Ma shahayahu shiyeh, that which was will be. And so that rankles with our freedom. That rankles with the idea, wait, if God knows that everything is going to be, then why do I need to? And the rabbis ask this question, why do I need to keep all the mitzvot? It's a lot of mitzvot, a lot of avodah, a lot of work, a lot of investment and strain and money and time. If what will be, then why do I need to invest in that? Well, it's not so simple. Because on the other side of the coin, we have another verse in the Ethics of Our Fathers tells us, Hakol tzafui. Everything is foreseen. Again, that idea, the Arabs have it, they use it all the time. Maktub. They go into battle screaming maktub. It's written. If it's written that I'm going to die in a car, I'm going to die in a car, and therefore I'll go 120 on a 2-lane road and pass with guardrails so that no one can go anywhere. I see it every night on the road to Hebron. And so there's a certain, I guess we would call it ineluctability. Oh, that's a word I love to use, never get to. Right? There's a certain divine providence that's pulling us down a road, but that's not what the verse says. The verse says, Hakol tzafui. God foresees all the options of everything that you could ever do, every moment. Because he's infinite. So infinity means he can, in his computer, he can calculate instantly, faster than AI, all the possibilities of what you might do in any situation. Aval, the end of the verse is the key. Hareshut natuna. The permission is given. Permission means free choice. God foresees all the options. Man gets to choose. Now, after man chooses and he does what he does, whether it's good or the opposite, we can say, it was God made me do it. Or some other force underneath the throne of glory that doesn't necessarily represent the infinite, eternal, merciful creator. Some other force that we don't really want to meet on the dark alley. Okay, so here I am stuck between free choice and divine providence. And this is the classic theological conundrum, question, argument, controversy between philosophers, religious, non-religious, Jewish, non-Jewish, this idea of free choice and the idea of providence. And when we look at what's happened over the last 2 weeks in the world, what's been happening in Ukraine for a year and a half, what's been happening, well, to our brothers and sisters back in America for many years, we wonder, how is it that there are such glaring contradictions in the political arena and the philosophical arena and the religious arena? How can it be that we could ever get along? How can there ever be peace? And that's why we say, Oseh Shalom Bimromav. God makes peace above. Peace between who above? Who's above to make peace from? The souls that are there have earned it, and they're sitting in their divine academies enjoying the infinite Torah. Or look, if they have right, they can look down here and get enjoyment from the world of people here. But very few souls actually have that telescope. Nonetheless, if I am stuck, why am I stuck? Because I want to act with freedom. I want to choose with freedom. But I'm being taught that there is destiny. And then we're taught, no, but you still have choice. No, but there's still destiny after the fact. Before the fact, there are choices. And we put that into a situation of war, and why would I want to fight for anything or anybody? I grew up in America. I grew up after the draft was taken away. Being a soldier wasn't considered the most honorable profession or choice in the 70s after the Vietnam War. It was rather much lower than the top choices that people would want to go for with their life ambitions. Whereas in my grandfather's generation, going to the army was considered noble. Service, dedication, self-sacrifice for the nation. What happened to self-sacrifice for the nation in America? Well, we learned that a lot of the wars were not for the things that we thought they were. The whole Cold War, this idea of democracy versus communism, that seems a rather well-written script. Now, looking back, to get young men to fight and old men to sell weapons, and to make a lot of money for a few people. Now, you could say World War II was different. We had an international enemy. But if you look deep into the archives, you'll find out that there were a lot of American companies doing business with the Nazi regime long before World War II began. And so, in effect, American companies were selling weapons to the Nazis so that there would be a Nazi empire in which to engage in war with in 1939 and forward in 1941, when America entered the war. Do you understand what I just said? It's hard, I know. I have to repeat it to myself. The Americans sold weapons to the people that their children would go fight with. That's a fact. If you don't like it or don't believe it or want to name call me out of here, that's fine. All the people that don't have the facts or don't have clear thinking, immediately, the first thing you see is they resort to name calling. And then they resort to prevarication, which means going around the truth with some other narrative of false truth. And we're not here about that. Anybody that wants to go to the truth will find it. And people that would rather be paid for adapting somebody else's truth, well, they'll find that too. But we're sitting here, I'm overlooking the backyard, the beautiful valley. You know, you've seen it in many other videos. Right? Out there is Gaza, about 45 miles. We've heard a few booms today, a few jets, but not much compared to what we've had. But, you know, after the president's visit, well, that's another discussion I'm not going to have right now. But it did not build hope in the American people, in the Jewish people. Most of the people I know that heard it were disappointed. because we understood it is really just a continuation of the status quo. We defend ourselves, and then we get proscribed for defending ourselves. We need weapons to defend ourselves, then we use them, then we get vetted, we get edited, we get criticized when we want to do the job properly. But nobody's perfect on either side. Okay. But what about our problem is this wrestling match between free choice, and therefore I got to do everything I can to do the right things at the right time in the right way because I believe in something bigger than myself, whether it's God or the Jewish people or the Torah or democracy or just freedom. If I believe in freedom, then I got to fight for freedom. And if I believe in predestiny that says you're going to die whether you're going 60 miles an hour or 120, which go look up the differences of the chances of death driving at those speeds, and you'll see what I mean, then nothing has value because everything's written and there's no free choice. So, but we rely on our sages. The sages say, no, yes, there is free choice and there is predestination, but it is not rigid. It is not fixed. Rather, it unfolds according to our daily behavior. And this we see in the story of Moses, that Moses went to the nation of Midian, which is the land which is now Saudi Arabia, after he ran away from Pharaoh, after he killed an Egyptian who had killed a Jew. Right? You remember the story from the Bible. Moses ran. He was 80 years old when that happened, according to our sages. And so he went to Midian. It's a great story. They were being attacked by snakes everywhere, and they didn't know what to do. And here's this stranger, this Hebrew. They weren't called Jews then. The Hebrew came along and said, I can tell you what to do. Bring in all the storks you can find. And they brought in storks, and they brought in birds, big birds. I imagine there might have been more than storks, maybe herons, maybe a few other types of birds that migrate. Tons of birds migrate through the Middle East, between Africa and Europe. Okay, and he said, bring those birds into the city, and they will eat up all the snakes. And that's exactly what happened. And they got rid of the snake plague. And so they said, oh, this guy's smart. Let's make him king. So Moses quickly climbed the ladder in Midian. And people wanted to see who he was, especially Pharaoh, because Pharaoh in Egypt heard about this new king in Egypt. Who is this? They didn't know it was Moses. And so he sent the astrologers to take pictures of him. And the astrologers said, he looks like a very angry, dangerous, violent man. He could kill somebody. And that's what they wrote about Moses, not knowing that he had this previous story with Pharaoh, an earlier Pharaoh, by the way. So, but nonetheless, what do we get? What do we learn from this? That Moses became the merciful, the patient, the long-suffering leader, Messiah of his generation, and put up with a lot of flack and a lot of backtalk and a lot of real tripe, if you want to look that word up. I used to use it for a type of a bad fish for bait, but but nonetheless, it's Moses put up with everything to try to save the Jewish people, and he didn't kill anybody. And he told them, I didn't use, when they challenged his authority, he says, I haven't used one thing of yours. I have done only what God has told me to do. And there was a certain group, the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, were always against him. But we see that according to the makeup of the personality of Moses, according to the divine providence of the thing, he was supposed to be a very not good person. And he became a very, very good person, so that the divine presence rested on him for 40 years, and he was able to bring the Jewish people out of Egypt and to the border of the holy promised land. So he changed his destiny. So it wasn't a fixed thing. It was flexible, but it's based on our deeds. So we have predestination and we have free choice. And it all depends on what we do. So don't let anybody make you believe in only one side, because only one side produces terrible errors in the perception of how life is supposed to be lived. And here we are, the sun is going down. It's a beautiful, quiet afternoon. I don't know what's going on in Gaza, but I know tens of thousands of soldiers are standing around twiddling their thumbs because of the conflicts that have emerged here in the politics of nations. And, as Shabbat comes down, we're used to having this beautiful, wonderful, rested patience come down upon us, and we let go of the weekday. We let go of the problems of the previous week. We let go of our worries for the future. There is just peace and gratitude for what we have. Every man, every Jew, God says, is a king on Shabbat because he has a certain amount of sovereignty over his own life and his own house, at his own table. And that sovereignty is a little spark of kingship. Okay. So did we solve the problem? Do you feel a little more free? Free to choose. Free to choose. What will come from your choices is not necessarily what you planned, which we often see. That's where God enters the matrix of our deeds. Because we can, many times I've try to do one thing and I ended up doing another. And it always, with God's help, turned out better than I planned. And when my plan got thrown in my face and I was starting to get a little huffy and puffy about it, and I saw better things happen. Usually it happens with one's wife, right? You got a plan, my wife had another plan, and her plan turned out better. And this is a normal thing. But when you tie it into the program that we've just been talking about, we understand that there are forces at work behind our lives that are trying to lead us to goodness, whether we know it or like it or want it or not. And if we resist long enough, then it just gets harder to get on that path to the goodness, to the peace, to the Shabbat of all Shabbats, the 1,000 years of peace which all the religions have prophesied at one time or another. Well, we believe it's coming sooner than we think. That 6,000th year in Judaism is only 226 years away, which sounds like, well, that's a long time. But we know that the redemption in Egypt was 210 years early. So we're hoping for another early redemption, because if we wait to the end, who knows what will be left. And once we get redeemed as a people, and the law of God becomes in place and God reveals himself, then all the nations that are attached to the Jews in the proper way will benefit and will receive from that divine guidance. That predestination of the sparks of goodness that are in us want to come out. Those sparks want to come out of us into the world because they're little pieces of this infinite thing we call the divine presence. And as a people, the Jewish nation is the collective carrier of those sparks. And that's why we're always in the middle of everything, even though we're the smallest of nations. Because we have something special inside us that's driving us, whether we like it or not. So if you're a non-Jew and you know a Jew, ask him if he'd like to learn a little bit about his divine soul, his divine spark, his providence. No, I'm a free man. I don't want any religion. It'll take away my freedom. And that's not true at all. The sages teach, Ein ben chorim ele ben Torah. There is no free man except someone who lives in the boundaries under the umbrella of Torah. There's plenty of room to operate in the Torah. But we are guided away from the things that go against nature and that go against the divine code of the way this world was designed. And the Torah gives us that code and gives us the way to live in order that we could still be surviving 4,000 years after Abraham. So whether you're Jewish or you're non-Jewish, we have to be attached to each other and to the Torah, and that is going to be the ultimate ticket to the future. Not the big future world where, everything's going to be turned upside down and inside out, but a better world today, a better world in your life this Shabbat, a better relationship with your wife, a better relationship with your kids, a better relationship with your friends and your boss. Even that. Imagine. Wouldn't that be nice? Because the Torah gives us the tools to rethink and rebuild our personalities, and to drop the things in our personalities that we don't need, and to acquire the things we do need. But we have to be dedicated to the teaching. It's not a one-day project. So Shabbat, is the best time to open the book, to contemplate, to think deeply, to think twice, 3 times, 4 times to your conclusions of what you read. And how do you, the rabbis teach you, how do you know that you're learning for God's sake, not your own selfish sake, but for God's sake? Because you ask the question when you learn, what am I to learn from this? What is this going to teach me? So in other words, our learning, when it's truly for our self-improvement, is for God's sake. Why? Because when we learn for our self-improvement, we're creating a place for Him in the world through us. Now, that's a pretty good thing to do with your life, wouldn't you say? So join us all in the life of Torah. Open a book. That's all it is. Read. Any language. Find commentators. Listen to our work on YouTube, Facebook. There's thousands of other good rabbis out there too. And wherever your heart wants to take you that's good, it's going to be good. And trust, there is something good that's driving our lives, every one of us. We want to stay attached to it. So I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, a true peace. And we will look for you on all the platforms, hopefully Saturday night and the coming week. And hopefully we'll see good news coming out of Gaza and other quarters of this very complex situation. God bless you all. Shabbat Shalom.